This is an incredibly powerful story of a woman of God whose unwavering faith turned sacrifice into triumph, whose love defied fear, and whose courage lit a fire of hope that still burns brightly today, proving that even in the darkest moments, God's light shines the brightest. Corrie Ten Boom was just an ordinary woman with extraordinary faith. But when the world was swallowed by hatred and war, she made a decision that would change lives forever. She wasn't a soldier, she wasn't a politician, but she was fearless. And in the face of evil, she chose faith over fear, love over hatred, and hope over despair. This is her story. Corrie was born in 1892 in the Netherlands, the youngest daughter of Corrie Ten Boom, a humble yet deeply devoted Christian watchmaker. From the very beginning, Corrie's home radiated prayer, kindness, and unwavering faith with love for God and love for people. The Ten Boom family didn't just talk about faith, they lived it. Her father often told her, "Faith is not meant to be hidden, it is meant to shine." Little did she know that faith would be tested in the most unimaginable way. Then, in 1940, everything changed. The Nazis invaded the Netherlands. At first, people hoped it would pass. But soon, the darkness spread. Jewish families disappeared overnight. Shops were abandoned. Children were torn from their homes. Corrie watched in horror as fear tightened its grip on her beloved city of Haarlem. But the Ten Boom family refused to turn away. One night, a Jewish woman knocked on their door. Her face was filled with terror. "Please, help me." Corrie and her family did not hesitate. They took her in, knowing that if they were caught, they would be sentenced to death. And that was just the beginning. In the heart of their home, Corrie and her family built a secret hiding place, a false wall, no larger than a small closet, hidden behind a bookshelf in Corrie's bedroom. At any moment, the Nazis could storm in. But faith is greater than fear. The Ten Boom family became a lifeline to the Jewish people. They provided food, shelter, and hope. And every time a knock came at the door, their hearts pounded. But they opened it anyway. Over 800 lives were saved because they refused to turn away. But then, betrayal. In 1944, someone turned them in. The Gestapo stormed their home, tearing it apart, searching every corner. But by a miracle, the 6 Jews hidden behind the false wall were never found. Instead, Corrie, her sister Betsie, and her elderly father Casper were dragged away in chains. The cost of their faith? Everything. Days later, Corrie Ten Boom died in his prison cell. But even in suffering, he left his children with one final lesson: never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. Corrie and Betsie were sent to Ravensbrück, one of the most brutal concentration camps of the Nazi regime. Here, women were treated as less than animals, cold, starving, abused, beaten. And yet, even in this pit of darkness, Corrie and Betsie carried the light of Christ. Corrie had miraculously smuggled a small Bible into the camp. In secret, she and Betsie led whispered worship services, sharing scripture with broken souls. Even in the face of death, they chose to love. But the suffering was too much for Betsie. One night, with her frail body shaking from sickness, Betsie turned to Corrie and said, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." Days later, Betsie was gone. And Corrie? She was broken. She had lost everything. But then, a miracle. One morning, Corrie was called to the office. Her name was on a list. She was free. It wasn't a rescue. It wasn't planned. It was a clerical error. Days later, every woman in her barracks was sent to the gas chambers. God had spared her for a purpose. Corrie dedicated the rest of her life to spreading the message of faith, hope, and forgiveness. She traveled the world, preaching about the power of God's love, And then, the unthinkable happened. After one of her speeches, a man approached her. She recognized him instantly. He was a former Nazi guard from Ravensbrück. With tears in his eyes, he said, "I have found Jesus. I know God has forgiven me, but will you?" Corrie froze. This was the man who had stood outside the gas chambers. This was the man who had beaten her. Every fiber of her being wanted to refuse. But then, she remembered. Forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's a choice. And so, with all the strength she had, she reached out her hand. "I forgive you, not by my own strength, but by the power of Jesus Christ." Corrie Ten Boom's story is proof that no darkness is greater than God's light. She once said, "Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength." She knew that fear cripples, but faith frees. She once asked, "Is prayer your steering wheel or your spare tire?" Because to her, prayer was not a last resort. It was her lifeline. She lost everything, but she never lost her faith. She suffered beyond words, but she never stopped loving. She was surrounded by evil, but she chose to forgive. And today, her message still echoes. Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. So I ask you, are you willing to trust Him too? Has God helped you through an impossible situation? Share your story in the comments. If Corrie's story inspired you, hit like and share this message of faith. Subscribe for more testimonies that will strengthen your faith. Because no matter what you're facing today, God is still in control.